Hi, my name is Clarissa, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how I overcame my depression. I'm feeling a little anxious to make this video. I knew that making this channel, I wanted to be very transparent in my experiences. I'm honestly just a real person with real issues. I feel like I'm a very average person. I'm 25 years old, but I do feel like I had the opportunity to learn a lot of hard lessons really early on. The purpose of this video is specifically to share my experience. I am obviously not at all a professional, so that's why I'm putting it out there that this is strictly my experience and it's strictly for purposes of possibly gaining a better understanding or better view of what you or someone else may be going through. By the end of the video, I hope that there's an understanding of how I triumphed over this pain and how it actually made me better in the end. So with all that being said, I'm going to start giving you a little bit of my background. So when I was in high school, that's when I first identified and started to think that, hey, maybe I might be depressed. I had had this feeling of depression a lot throughout my childhood, and it intensified as I got older, going throughout middle school and then into high school. It really peaked. When I was younger, I really did not have a word for it. I just straight up thought that there was something wrong with me. I didn't know why I felt lonely. I didn't know why I felt empty despite being around people all the time. I've been working with a new therapist for about 7 months, and in that time, I've really been able to get an understanding of my past. There were some things that I already knew because I had done a little work a few years ago on my own without a professional, but I really came to this professional because I really wanted extra tools and I really wanted someone who's dealt with smaller types of traumas. Even really small traumas and really small things that happened in your life can have a huge impact if you go on a long life with your emotions suppressed or you not having understanding of what was really going on with you at the time. Those things can magnify and they can become a much bigger issue as you get older. So with my therapist, I was actually able to identify factors in my life that contribute to that specific state of existence, which was depression. For one, I felt the need to people please a lot. This was something that I was indirectly taught as a child. I wanted to be the obedient child. I wanted to be the one that always got the gold star and got the straight A's. And so indirectly, I was learning that I needed to be who other people needed me or wanted me to be in order to get validation, be liked, accepted, and appreciated. Another thing I learned in my childhood, which I'm not going to get super specific with because that's a story for another day, love and connections are conditional and sacrificial. And the last theme that I want to share that contributed to my depression was I have to make the most of every single moment because good times and happiness don't last. When I was in high school, I would see commercials about medication for depression, and I honestly did not have an understanding of what depression was. And to my understanding from my very little research that I could comprehend at the time was that depression was a chemical imbalance in your brain. So if you're depressed, it means that you have a chemical imbalance in your brain. This is what I thought. So at that time, I basically just accepted that I am the person who gets depressed. I am a person who suffers from depression, and this is something that I cannot control. This is something that I might not ever be able to escape, and I tried my best to cope with that idea as best as I could. I really thought that this was something that I could never ever overcome. So in my mind, because of this theme that I had in my head that I had to be a person that other people needed or wanted me to be in order for me to be liked and accepted, I knew that I had to cover up this depression that I had. I knew that I couldn't let a lot of people know that I was depressed. And also back then, it wasn't like a thing for people to be openly depressed or openly struggling. It was just the start of social media. So Instagram was still extremely new. We were still kind of dabbling in Facebook here and there. So it was a lot of like validation online. You always had to have that happy persona. The Gen Z kids these days will not know, like, we were not posting crying pictures. We just weren't talking about mental health. Like it straight up wasn't a thing. If you were going through something, it usually was very private, with the exception of people who would be in relationships and then blast their stuff on Facebook of the breakup and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was just very different than it is now. You felt the need to have this happy persona. So that's exactly what I did. In order to cover up the fact that I was depressed, I would have this persona that would come out of me when I needed to be in social situations or when it wasn't appropriate for me to be down or sad or kind of absent-minded. And what came along with that persona was actually an intense dissociation, which at the time I just thought was part of depression. I thought that was something that happens when you're depressed, like you just extremely disconnect. And for anyone who doesn't know what dissociation is, I'm going to put the definition up here for a second, and then I'm going to describe exactly how I was experiencing dissociation. So when I had to be in certain social interactions, I would heavily dissociate, which for me would feel like I am almost leaving my body in a way. The best way I described it to people is that I was watching myself talk to other people and I was like a bystander in my own mind. I could not for the life of me be present in moments because those were extremely overwhelming situations to me. I could not be myself. I did not feel safe being myself. I felt like this is the persona that people like. This is the Clarissa that people know. And this is who I have to be. This is who I have to function as. I have to pretend that I'm this high functioning person. That's how people know me as. That's how I've gained these friends and these people around me, by being this person. So when I had to be that person, it was almost like a rejection in my body of who I was. It was like, okay, it's time to turn the dial and turn the switch. And when you're done with this, we'll turn it back and you could just continue being in your head of who you are and what you struggle with. I feel like if you've been through that kind of thing, you understand what dissociation is. I hope that doesn't sound crazy. I know that it probably does, but it's a real thing. People really go through this. This is something that people do in situations where they feel unsafe usually. So because of this heavy dissociation that I had, I'm a little sad to say that I really don't remember much from high school. I think because I dissociated so heavy, I wasn't even able to make proper memories. It's something that I understand that had to happen at the time in order for me to feel like I was surviving. Along with my dissociation, I also had moments where I felt like I could really just be myself, but only in this really tiny pocket of time, right? So for example, when I was turning 16 and a lot of my other classmates were turning 16, there were so many sweet 16s. So I feel like every single one I would look forward to, and there would be like a moment within each event where I'd be like, maybe like dancing or just having a really good blissful time. And I would live for the highs and happiness of that moment where I felt like I could be myself. I wasn't depressed. Like I could just do things that I straight up enjoyed. And these were the times that I lived for consistently. I was always looking for, when is the next time that I can kind of free myself of what I'm feeling and just come out and be who I am, kind of in a hidden way, kind of in a masked way, right? I always look forward to the next event or next opportunity when I could soak up just like that bit of happiness and hold on to it for as long as I could, to kind of cope with my depression as well. Overall, it was really hard for me to understand who I was and what I was going through when I was constantly shrinking myself or covering up who I was on a daily basis. Even though who I was wasn't even bad, I could never allow myself to be present, hence the persona. So moving on into how I really fell into this depression. After a lot of work, I was able to identify how this sequence of events would happen, whether it was when I was in high school or times in college when I really felt like I got into this depression and I couldn't describe it. In high school, I fell into depression because I didn't want to be around my family. I felt like I always had to perform in front of my family and be the gold star child. And I don't want anyone to think that, you know, oh, your parents are bad people or anything like that. It's just that I think every parent strives to have their child be the absolute best version they can. But I think that in my case, without proper guidance, I may have taken it to the extreme. I didn't want to be around my family because I didn't feel like I could be myself with the people who were supposed to love and care for me no matter what I was. I felt that there was a lot of criticism on me at all times, whether that was true or not in the moment. That is exactly how I felt, and that's just my experience. So because I didn't want to be around my family, it turned into I don't want to be around anyone. And because I didn't want to be around anyone, it started to turn into loneliness. When I felt lonely, when I felt rejected, when I isolated myself, I started to feel like I'm just just better off alone. No matter how many friends I had, when people had interest in me, like a romantic interest, even when I had a boyfriend, I still felt like I'm just misunderstood. No one's ever gonna wanna be with me because I'm depressed and I have this issue. And I would just always tell myself, you're better off alone. So from that, then I became depressed, of course. I found that this was an inflation of my feelings. The root cause was that I was not allowing myself the space to A, be myself, and B, be present in the moment. And because of this, things snowballed into depression. After I graduated college, I realized that my depression was actually situational and it had to do with my environment. In college, my depression would be triggered by things that reminded me of my childhood, of having to be suppressed, having to be always watched, surveillanced, criticized. Anything that made me feel unsafe in that way made me feel like I was back in my childhood again, unsafe, not feeling emotionally tended to, not feeling like I could be myself, and having to mold myself to be someone that everyone else perceived me to be. My first example of this, and the first time that my depression came back in college, was actually when I was an RA. The nature of that job was basically that if you did anything wrong, you could be fired, right? Like if you went to a party and someone took a picture of you there, you're fired, you know? And it was that type of pressure that I don't even have control over who I am. I do want to go out and have fun with my friends, but I also don't want to be at risk of losing my job. It was kind of this back and forth battle of like, you have to be this one person, this stellar image of what a great student should be. And then there was this other side of me that was like, I just really want to be a normal person. I just want to be myself. And by the time I became an RA, I had already had a whole entire year of college where I was able to just do what I wanted and really be myself. For the first time ever, I wasn't depressed anymore. And I just felt like I could 100% be myself. Like that was me, that was who I was. And so once I got into this job, I found myself molding myself back into a person that I'm supposed to be, a person that an RA is supposed to be, this type of role model and this stellar student that I was supposed to be. So my depression came back and I didn't understand why. Another thing in college that was actually happening at the same time of this RA situation was that I was in a relationship where I was with someone who was very affirming of who I was, but at the same time, I felt like I was also molding myself to be the best version of myself all the time and be the best version of myself for this person. Now, over time, it just was not sustainable, so it didn't last forever, but that also contributed to the fact that I was trying to uphold this person that had to be this and then also had to be that. It was just so much, and again, it was just a rejection of who I was, what I did to get out of the habits that I created for myself in order to survive. First, I had to know and understand my reality, and this didn't happen for me until the 2020 pandemic when I had to move back in with my parents. And what I described that to people as is I literally took my adult self, who had learned and grown so much, and put myself right back in the situation where I already thought I'd overcome this. I already thought that I was over this and moved past it. I thought that I could keep running from whatever it was at home that made me feel suppressed, less than. I had no choice but to come back and live in that, and my mind and body and my spirit rejected it to the highest level. I thought that my depression in high school was bad, which it really was, but this took it another level higher, mostly because I had grown so much. I had so much more knowledge. My brain was more developed. There was just so much that was different and way more positive things in my life that I had going for myself. I was more sure of who I was. I liked who I was. At that time, I was a little more comfortable with being myself, but now that I had to be back living with my parents and being in this place where I wasn't not at all used to being myself, I didn't feel accepted being myself because I had been this fake person for my parents and for my family for so many years that I felt like I had to go back to being that. And in a sense, I did. But in another sense, everything that was rejecting it within myself, it was like a straight up battle between you need to be this because this is what we did in the past and this is what we know that works and will get you through this. And then there was this other side of me that was like, we know better and we should not be doing this again. So that's where like an extreme depression came through, and I was always anxious. I was not healthy at that time. That added to the fact that I had lost so much, all of the seeds that I planted throughout my time in college. Like I was not able to reap any of the benefits of what I was working on so hard throughout that time. So during this time, in order to understand my reality, I went seeking for a lot of tools. I had found an Instagram account that was a psychologist, and she was really describing a lot of different family dynamics and why you may feel this way. Some other therapist on TikTok was reenacting how you may have been treated as a child and how that connects to this. I did so much inner child work in that time to really understand and be kind to myself. It's okay that you took things this way. It's okay that you didn't know better. It's okay that you grew up and held on to this resentment for so long. It's okay that you didn't understand for so long. The way you were treated at this time affected you up until adulthood. I had to come to terms with everything that my reality was. I had to either accept it, work through it, or a combination of both, overall with the goal to eventually release it and move forward from it. Living beyond survival. Once I was actually starting to identify what I had to work through and things that I had to really release and let go, was actually interesting timing because I was moving out of the house. So because of this, I was able to have my own space and get out of this environment that triggered me so heavily. In my own space, I was able to figure out who I really was, who I wanted to be moving forward, and all of the things that I wanted to leave behind and never be again. I think there were still times where I doubted myself, or I kind of felt like I'm never going to be able to heal from this. Those beliefs that I had for myself were really damaging. I wish that I could go back and tell myself post-college, during college, and even in high school that this is not you. Like, this is not a chemical imbalance in your brain. This is your situation. And I wish you could step out of your situation and see it from the outside. During those times, it just was not possible. So it wasn't until I moved out that I realized that all I really needed was to be removed from these situations that were causing me so much turmoil and anguish and led to my depression. Present day, battling with depression. At this point in time, I really feel like I've overcome my depression. I feel like when my intrusive thoughts start to creep up, I know how to handle it. I know how to tell myself what is true and what is not true in the moment. There are still situations and events that make me feel alone or empty and kind of leave me with that feeling of depression creeping up. I have to remind myself, what is going on right now? Why am I feeling this way? And one thing one of my really close friends taught me was to ask myself, what is the threat? Like, honestly, what is the threat right now? Why am I feeling like this? Usually when we get to a dark place, it's because we let ourselves get there, and there are thoughts that go unchecked for an X amount of time, and then it leads to this whole entire downward spiral. So asking yourself, what is the threat, is really making you pause and think, what triggered this? Like, is there even a threat for me to feel like this? I recently was in a situation where I felt like the social interaction wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. I showed up as myself, and just the outcome of the conversation between myself and this group of people was not what I wanted it to be at all. And so when I got home, I felt really empty. I felt like I failed in the whole entire interaction. My intrusive thoughts started to tell me, this is why you're better off alone. No one understands you. You're not good at communicating. You're better off being alone. And I stopped. I thought to myself, I just don't think that's true. I'm not better off being alone. I have family that loves me. I have a boyfriend who loves me. There are just so many people who tell me that they care for me. So no, I'm not better off alone. These are old intrusive thoughts that are surfacing back up, and it's because I was insecure in this small moment, and that was it. And that was the perceived threat. After reminding myself of what was true for me, I was able to release it. Other ways that I prevent getting into depressive episodes present day is actually journaling about any said situation that comes up. And this also helps with my anxiety. If I feel like I'm ever dwelling on something too much, I just go to my journal and I write down every single thing about it, and I don't hold back. Then I could just read it back, take even more notes on it, and try to work through it and process it myself. I don't want to have to call my therapist every week or every other week and work through things that I eventually want to be able to rely on myself and rely on my faith to work work through and release these problems as they come. If you're a spiritual or religious person or just a follower of Christ like me, praying and releasing control of the things that we truly don't have control of really seriously helps in so many aspects. Like, it's just mind-blowing the fact that we try to hold on to control. We start to ruminate over these things that are just things that we will never ever be able to grasp, and it eats us up alive. That has been my experience so far. A really good thing that came out of all of this is my resilience and my tolerance for pain, and when problems come along, I'm able to handle things and stay calm to a degree that I never thought was possible. I am able to be myself to a degree that I never thought was possible, and I'm able to have hope for a future that isn't in darkness, that isn't in pain, just a future that I can enjoy. Like, I can wake up in the morning and be happy that the sun is out. All the little things in life are now things that I absolutely do not take for granted. So those are kind of the takeaways. I'm absolutely a better person for it. And if you have gone through something like this, if you are going through something like this, I really, really recommend that you talk to someone that you trust. I do want to let everyone know that the parts of my life where I was pretty much extremely depressed to the point where I just wasn't present in my life, those were extremely painful times. I've been processing this, and it's very hard to talk about. It's hard to know that if I had tools, if I had better people to talk to, if there were better resources even at that time, I could have been saved a lot of pain, and I think I would have been a lot happier. But I can't live in the past, and I can't change what my past was, so I always try to look forward to what this means for me now, and this just means that I'm going to have less depressive episodes in the future. I have had way less depressive episodes. Even in this past year and a half, I have not been depressed, and I don't foresee it coming back unless there's a huge type of life catastrophe in my life. In perfect timing, the sun's actually going down right now. It's the end of the day. So I just want to take this time to thank you so much for watching this video. I want to explore more topics like these going forward. I actually have a big list of things such as my disordered eating and how I overcame my social anxiety. All the things that I feel like I've already overcome, I want to continue to share. And if this video was helpful to you at all, if you see yourself in this story, please let me know, whether it's in the comments or if you want to private DM me on Instagram. I really want to know if this is something that is helpful to other people, to know that you're not alone in what you're going through. If you have any suggestions in what topics you'd like me to touch on next, I am extremely open to all of that feedback. I'd really like to know what you'd like me to talk about. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who watches my videos, whether you're subscribed and you keep coming back, or whether you're just like a new person on this channel. I really want you to feel wrapped up in all of my gratitude, and I am really looking forward to seeing everyone in the next one. If you're not a current subscriber and you want to follow my journey, want to support this channel and myself, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications so that you know when a new video drops. I drop a new video every other Thursday. Be blessed, take care of yourself, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.